and welcome to Traditional Painting the Digital Way. This is where I use digital painting apps to teach traditional painting techniques. This is part 3 of my Inktober mummy video, and in this video we're going to add the color washes and do the final inking for the painting. The app that I'm going to be using is Infinite Painter for Android, and if you're following along traditionally, check out part 1 where I have a list of all the inks and the pens and the kind of things that you can use for traditional Inktober. So here I'm going to go ahead and start adding the color washes. And I want to go ahead and just sort of add an overall blue look to this painting because it's nighttime, so we want sort of a bluish cast to it, and but I didn't want it to be really black or dark looking behind the mummy, so I just kind of wanted sort of a grayish look or a really light blue color. And you can do this with your watercolors and just make a really light wash over your pencil drawing, and if you've already done your inking, make sure that your ink is waterproof. And then here I just wanted to go ahead and add in the dark in the back of the mummy here. And in Infinite Painter, the brushes that I like to use for watercolor are the Turner brush or the Marin brush. And I just like them because they make kind of a sort of a smooth wash, and they have a smooth edge. So I'm using these brushes to do the background, and here I wanted a darker blue color for the doorway that the mummy is coming out of in the tomb. And so you can probably use an ultramarine blue if you're following along traditionally, and you can add some purple in it too, just to darken it a little bit. And again, I'm using the Marin brush and the Turner brushes. Those are, and then when I want to smooth them out, I use the airbrush category, and I put the blender on airbrush, and I use the Banksy brush or one of those to sort of smooth out the watercolor look. If I want it a more detailed look, I'll just kind of leave it, but I want these to look like smooth watercolor washes, and here I'm adding purple into the doorway and under the skeleton for the shadows and along the edge of the wall. And again, I just want these to look smooth. And if you're following along traditionally, use a lot of water, and that will smooth out your paint if you're using watercolor. If you're using alcohol markers or something like that, then you would use a blender to sort of smooth them out. And here I just want to add a little bit of some brown to the tomb wall here, and just kind of give a grayish brown look. If you're following along traditionally, a burnt umber color or just any kind of a walnut, just sort of a brownish look, and then throw in some blue to gray it. And I'm just smoothing it out again in Infinite Painter, trying to get sort of a smooth wash. And then I want to show the dark texture that's on the tomb wall, so I threw in some purple. And so these are all sort of nighttime colors because this is all happening at nighttime. So we want blues and purples and dark browns. We don't want real bright colors in this painting because we want it to look like it's at night. And then I'm just adding some more shadows with the purple color and putting it on the walls and the rock wall, a little bit on the steps, under the mummy, just anywhere that you have a shadow. And I'm using my photo reference here, and the shadows work fine for it. You just have to make the light source be the moon and not the sunshine. So that's what I'm doing here, just kind of following along. Same kind of shadows, but they're going to be nighttime shadows instead of daytime, so the colors are all muted purples and blues. And so here I'm just adding a little bit more shadow on the door of the tomb and around on the mummy, and then I painted in the moon with a light yellow color. And if you're doing this with watercolor, you can use sort of a white with your light yellow, and it will make sort of a thick color. Just don't put a lot of water and you can make a pretty good thick moon. Or you can use gouache if you want to, if you want a thicker paint for the moon. And then here I'm adding the cracks in on the wall with a brown color. And if you're following along traditionally, you can use a thinner brush for this, probably a number 3 round brush, or maybe even a brush marker if you're using alcohol markers. And I'm just kind of smoothing it out a little bit, but leaving a little bit of the lines here too, because I kind of want to show cracks in the stone and the rough edge of it, and just kind of giving it a little bit of texture. And then here I want to go ahead and sort of work a little bit more on the rock wall and sort of around, just try to add a little bit more of some shadows there. And then I wanted to do the bandages on the mummy. And I want these to be dirty looking bandages. So we don't want these real bright white. We want sort of a dirty brown color again. And you can use a burnt umber if you're following along traditionally. And just kind of make the bandages look sort of dingy and dirty and grimy. And then you can leave little places of white to shine through for the bones. And of course they're not white because we've kind of done an overall wash, blue wash, but you want the lighter color to show through. And then here I'm working on the rock wall a little bit more and adding in some brown cracks and trying to show some suggestions of stones. You don't have to do every little stone, but just suggestions of the stone texture that the rock wall has. And also a little more on the tomb and a little bit on the doorway, also adding it for a bit of a shadow color in the doorway there. And I'm just kind of smoothing it out, but not completely smoothing it out. I just want kind of a suggestion of the stones, and I'll add the final more refined details with the ink when I get to the final inking part. And so this is what you do when you want to go ahead and do the final inking part. And I wanted to use a sort of a brown or a walnut ink color. And I like to use the Chanel pen mainly for my inks. If you want to play around with some of the others and make it look a little more spattery, there's several different ones that you can do that make it look a little more spattery, but the Chanel brush is the smooth one, and I like to use it because it mimics a Micron Pigma ink pen mostly. And so that's what you would use if you're following along traditionally. Find one of the Micron Pigma ink pens, or something that has a thin nib on it, and use sort of a walnut color. You can use a dip pen if you want to, and use Winsor & Newton inks. And they have acrylic inks and watercolor inks, just all kinds of inks that you can use for the final inking. And then here I'm using some more brown and drawing in the shadows on the door, giving it a little bit more detail, a little bit rougher look. Trying to get a little bit of a rough texture there to show that it's got a rock-like texture. And you just go ahead and do that with the wall and the wall of the tomb. And I'm doing the cracks in the rock there, just kind of showing different cracks here and a rough rock-like face on it, and just trying to make jagged lines here and make them look broken and not real smooth. And I'm working on the rock wall too, doing that. And for the moon, I wanted to use black to outline it, just to make it show up more. And I also wanted to use the black color of ink on the twiggy bushes that are on top of the tomb. This is like a tomb that's sort of in the side of a hill or something. And so it's got things that are growing on the top of it. And so I'm putting the spooky looking dead twiggy bushes on the top just to give it a more spooky look. And then I wanted to draw a little bit of in the shadows of the doorway there, just kind of make some texture. And so I'm using dark purple for that. And you can just go ahead and add it underneath his feet for the shadow as well, and kind of on the floor right there for more shadows. And I'm just kind of using that dark purple color. And then I wanted to go ahead and work on the mummy, and I wanted to use black ink on him because I want him to stand out really well. He's the main subject of our piece here, and so he really needs to stand out. And you can also use the black to make really good shadows for the eye sockets and around the teeth, and just show the gaps in between the bones where the wrapping has come off. So I wanted to use the black to really emphasize that. And so I'm just kind of working on the bones and the bandages, and keeping in mind that I still want the bandages to look really rough and ragged. So I'm making really ragged edges on the bandages and making them hang off of his hands and his arms, and just look like it's almost coming unwrapped in parts of his bandages there. And so I'm just kind of doing that and going over the bones again here on his pelvis, and making it look like some of the bandages are coming apart there, and that he's got a lot of the bandages are off on his midsection there. And then he's got a few bandages still around his legs, and I'm just making sure that they're all loose and ragged looking on his legs too, and on his feet. And just going over that completely, just trying to get that real ragged look there for him. And then you want to go ahead and just kind of darken some of the places in between the bones too, and darken maybe some of the shadows up against the tomb wall and the rock wall that comes out from the tomb, sort of darken those a little bit. And then of course I signed it, but that doesn't mean that I'm finished. So I zoomed out to see how it looked, and then I decided to add a few more details, like darkening the skeleton and adding a little bit more to the bandages, just a few places here, and looking at the rock wall a little bit and darkening the steps just a little bit to emphasize them a little bit more. And then I called it good. So this is the end of my Inktober Week 1 painting. And I'm going to go ahead and be starting a new one pretty soon. So that will be for Inktober Week 2. So stay tuned for that, and hit the subscribe button if you want to see that. And thanks everybody for watching, and thank you for your support. If you have any questions or suggestions about what you would like to see, just leave them in the comments down below, and I will catch you later.